Okay, I think we are on. So, welcome everybody to the panel on graduate school and beyond. We are delighted to welcome three outstanding alumni and the stars of today's show, Cody Reed, Jenny Morris, and Sean Purcell. I'm Suhan Mehta, assistant professor in the English department and the co-host of today's event, along with the awesome, fabulous Margie. A little bit about the event. Uh, our students have frequently noted in their exit surveys that their English degree at UCCS didn't necessarily prepare them for next steps, right? So to address this gap, we've been reaching out to our former students who are either in the workforce or pursuing further education. And today's event would be of particular interest to those who have questions about attending graduate school, right? So a little bit about the format of the event. Um, I will pose a question to our panelists, and Margie will drop it in the chat. Our panelists know the order in which they will be speaking, but I'll mention it nonetheless at the end of every question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you can.
And hopefully, there will be time for Q&A at the end. If not, you can email your questions to me. I'll drop my email at some point in the chat, and I'll forward them to the panelists if I cannot answer them myself. All right. So let us get started. So my first question, and this is going to be first Cody and Jenny, and then Sean after that. Could you introduce yourself, and could you share one thing that you will never put on your resume with us?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cody Reed. I am currently a second year master's student up here at CSU Fort Collins, and I will be defending my thesis tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that. It's kind of like I can see the end of the journey, and it's been a long one, even though it's only been 2 years. During that time, I also teach sections of CO 150. We can talk about more about like how that can help with funding and stuff later. I think that's one of those future questions. One thing that I would not put onto my resume, honestly, is probably that I have like aviation maintenance experience through my first degree. It's something that like I really was in an exploratory phase. I didn't know quite what I was doing right out of high school, and it's something that sounded fun and interesting. However, I don't think I want to put it on a resume, mostly because it's never really panned out very well. I'm much more happy being an English student for sure.
I'm Jenny Morris. I graduated in 2021. One thing I would never put on my resume. So I would have to say, one thing I'm not putting on my resume is the terrible call center job I worked part-time while I was a student. Definitely don't want a repeat of that. So that just goes in the bin.
Hello, I'm Sean Purcell. My pronouns are he, him. And I graduated in 2013, so long ago. The one thing that I would share about myself and not put on a resume, I've been reading a lot of manga right now, and it will go nowhere, and I just am like obsessed, and that's all I got. So if you need a recommendation.
That is awesome. And you just chatting before the recording, and then I think Jenny and Sean are both interested very much in ethics. And then Sean, in fact, defended his PhD thesis a few weeks back, and Cody's about to defend his master's thesis tomorrow, actually. So like I was joking, and this is like a typical dad joke, that we have lots of ethical defenders on this panel. Ha ha ha. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. Eclectic panel, eclectic interest. Love this. Absolutely. Now, could you guys share with us what was or is your field of study in graduate school? Where did you do graduate work? Where are you doing your graduate work? And why did you decide to pursue a graduate degree? So this is going to be, so Jenny, take it off first, and then we go to Sean, and then Cody after that.
Right. So I did my master's degree at the University of Chicago because I love punishment. I elected to go ahead and do it in 9 months, even though I was warned that most people are not successful at that. I did it. It's done. It's over with. I had a great time. I it was technically a master's in humanities, but I have always loved philosophy, so I did my best to specialize in philosophy. The University of Chicago and I don't do the same kind of philosophy, so that was an interesting journey. But I ended up doing a very interdisciplinary project where I was drawing from a lot of indigenous philosophy and UN documents around space exploration. So it was a little bit legal analysis, a little bit critical theory, a little bit environmental ethics. It was a lot of fun. And why? Well, I said I'm a glutton for punishment. But also I fell in love with philosophy as a freshman in college and just determined that was something I wanted to do long term. So it has expanded my career options, and I'm just really happy that I did it. It's been a great experience.
Hello. So what is my field of study? So I did a PhD. I did a master's degree right out of UCSS. I did an MFA in film and television production, and then in 2017 I started the doctoral program at the media school at IU. It's a PhD in media arts and sciences. My field of study was that I was trained, or I guess so. I'll get to that. So IU media school. But the reason I went to IU specifically was that I did an MFA in film production and finished that degree. But in the process, about 2 years in that 3-year program, I realized I hated doing film production and didn't want to do it professionally. And was just like, what am I going to do with my life? And the only PhD programs, because I really wanted to teach, that would accept someone without like a master's, like an MA, were going to be media studies programs. So I came into that program and was like, I'm going to do film studies. And it took me about like 2 months before I just pivoted as hard as I could away from film studies, because I just needed to get away from it. So I can go on about that, but I won't. But yeah, that's why I sort of came to the degree that I'm finishing up right now.
Hello again. So my field of study up here at CSU is honestly English literature, like through and through. I kind of went there for my undergrad, and now I'm up here through my master's program. But I think I've kind of, I don't know, like carved out a niche for myself a little bit here. I came in for 19th and 20th century literature, that like especially American literature, like that's always been of an interest to me. Dr. Carter will probably pretty appreciated that I actually led a whole lecture on No No Boy a little while ago. He introduced me to that. So that's been always kind of something that I've really wanted to always work with. But I'm really interested in how like the 19th and 20th century pieces of American literature have this intermeshment or like connection to contemporary literature, and how they continuously like constantly impacted in like meaningful ways. And that's actually what my thesis has kind of evolved into. So I've been studying like steampunk and post-colonial theory, and how that has always been impacted by like neo-Victorian literature and just straight up Victorian literature. So it's been a kind of wild ride, and I still don't know what it ends up adding to. But it's really fun. Um, and I think part of the reason why I decided to pursue a literature degree, especially like the master's, is honestly because I really wanted to see how far I could go for myself. I think coming into this, I did have kind of like this ideation that I wanted to teach. And after also teaching for like 2 years of rhetoric and writing, I'm like, I don't know if I want to continue doing this, at least not in this capacity. But I still want to do the same work and the same writing that I'm doing now. And I want to continue publishing and like working with like literary magazines and litfic. So it's been a really interesting ride of both like what I could do and also like just self-discovery. So
Wow, thanks for those excellent responses. Cody, it's very interesting. You said you started your response by saying how you carved out like a niche for yourself, and it seems to me that's something which both Jenny and Sean have also done in their own way, right? I mean, where Jenny's and again, like I was saying again, saying to you earlier, Cody, I really wish I could talk to each of you about like your respective fields, because there's there's so much stuff in there to talk about, right? So I mean, Jenny talks about, for instance, uh, drawing on indigenous philosophy theories, right? And then Sean with his many pivots from like MFA to like media studies and so on. So there's a way in which I think so much of this is about like finding out what you really care about, or maybe finding out what you really care about, right? And which you all kind of have done. And in terms of, you know, Cody, you said, you know, where does all this go? I don't know still where I'm going, you know, with my own. So, well, I think I'll know a little bit more. My colleagues are on this call, I shouldn't, you know, get too open with this, you know. All right. So, anyway, but thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, so kind of maybe from your, you know, this extraordinary sort of like intellectual ferment, right? That I'm seeing and I'm hearing in all your responses, kind of going to maybe some of the more, say bureaucratic is the right word, maybe like some of the more nuts and bolts aspects of like the whole process, right? So I guess what we'd be interested to know, our students would be interested to know that what was the application process like, right, for you guys, and if possible, could you share information about, you know, applying for financial aid and scholarships? So this, so Sean, could you get us started? Then we'll go from there. We'll go to Cody and then Jenny after that.
Sure. So it's been a while since I applied for school. I remember the main thing that I tried to do when applying for the PhD, especially because there's only a couple of lines that they have budget for in most departments, is that you really want to make sure that you fit really well with the department that you're going into. So one of the reasons why I was a poor MFA candidate during my MFA was that I was a bad fit for that school, and they should have known that, but they didn't, and they accepted me anyway. But for IU, it was actually like my least choice school. I was like, oh, I'll do it on recommendation of an advisor here at UCSS, and but like figure out if the department is right for you. So are there scholars who are studying things that are related to the things that you want to study? Try and get a vibe check from, like, reach out to the director of graduate, not the director of graduate studies, but like the people, the administrators, see if they respond to emails, see if they're willing to talk, and then making sure that the application is targeted. So like usually for most of mine, I'd have like a beginning paragraph and ending paragraph, and then the middle stuff I'd be able to swap things in. One person that I cited as being in my IU letter as someone who I wanted to work with, I'd never actually talked to. Although he's supposed to be a really nice guy, I assume. So, but like showing that you care about the program and that you're a good fit for that program helps sell the application.
So I would also agree with Sean. Getting a vibe check for the university that you like are interested in is actually like super important. I remember during my application process, that was advice that was given to me. And while I had been like emailing professors that are at the university just to see like how are you, also checking up like whatever work they're currently doing or whatever they're publishing, I was looking like pretty heavily into that. But one of the things I started also doing was reaching out to some of the graduate teaching assistants at the other universities too, because I was already interested in that and like as a process to see what they would offer in terms of either advice or also to be like, well, what is the culture at the university like, especially for like graduate teaching students. Um, in terms of like applications and financial aid. So when I had originally started applying to universities, there was a point where um, I think I applied to like four universities. It was like two PhD programs and then two master programs. And I did not get into the PhD programs, but I did get into both master's programs. But both of them were unfunded at the time. So I would have had to pay out of pocket like completely. And one university I was like, I don't really want to. But the other university, which is CSU, is the one I was more interested in. And when I had inquired about like the graduate teaching assistantship, I found out like I didn't get that. They said there were better candidates at the time, which is I think like a constant reoccurring theme in academia. So what I ended up doing was actually deferring enrollment for about a year. And then during that time, I was just working a normal job. I was actually working like a 9 to 5 office gig. It was pretty nice. It was pretty posh. I would still be doing it if that job still existed, but it got completely demolished. Um, And then at the end of that year, though, I had reapplied for the graduate student like teaching assistantship, and I had gotten it that time. So that's when I enrolled in 2023 up until now. And so this entire time I've been teaching, and during that time, I've also had my tuition like paid for, and I get a stipend per the month, which like it sounds really nice. It is really nice to have the tuition like paid for, but there are still some fees that have to be paid, plus the the money that you get from the stipend is not always enough to live off of. So it's a little tricky. I think finding good people to live with, like my wife, has been really helpful. So, but yeah, I think I've also gotten like one other like additional scholarship randomly like throughout my university, and that was actually recommended from professors that like I had been interacting with. I had no idea that I had won it or even like been able to apply for it, so I was like, sure, I'll take that too. So I think even if you were to get into like a graduate program, always be kind of on the lookout for like different fellowships or different assistantships or research assistantships. Anything honestly that gets your foot in the door in those areas is like highly recommended.
I think I'd like to add to both what Sean and Cody said. So first of all, it can be really hard to find your niche in academia, right? So knowing that the university is a good fit for you can be really difficult if you're just looking at it online. So I do recommend following up with graduate students who are already in the program. Like Cody and Sean both said, looking at the things that the professors in the department are publishing, reading some of their work, seeing, you know, if there's sort of people you want to work with there. For me, it was really difficult because there is nowhere that I have found at the university level that does the kind of work I'm interested in doing. So I'm always sort of on my own, making it up as I go along. But it is important to make sure that your department is friendly to that. So just seeing how many people are actually stepping outside of the department, maybe taking classes for me in like a Native American Studies program, or any sort of, I took a lot of classes in sociology. So different classes that you can take outside of the department that still count towards your degree could be really helpful. In terms of the application process, I am fresh off of a wave of doctoral applications. It's hard. It's hard work, guys. So just getting all of your references in, getting your writing sample exactly the way you want it. Those are all really important parts that can vary a lot depending on what your research interests are, what you're actually wanting out of your graduate school experience. And then in terms of funding, it can be really hard. I worked in education for years before I went to graduate school. So I was used to living off of, you know, whatever you could buy off the dollar menu at McDonald's. So that wasn't a challenge for me. I actually think I probably ate better as a graduate student than I did as a teacher. But just making sure that you actually have enough to cover rent and buy groceries, that can be a real challenge, especially if you're in a master's program, because very seldom do they give like first year master's students any sort of assistantship. It can be really hard to find. So just making sure you have a plan in case that doesn't happen if you're looking for that assistantship. But yeah, it was a great experience. It's a lot of hard work, but it's good stuff. You should do it.
And thanks a lot, you guys. Lots and lots of food for thought here. Yeah, I think it was Sean who said this, and I really want to kind of echo that. One of the reasons why I mean, okay, so I decided to go to the Ohio State University, not any Ohio State University, because they gave me money, right? But a big part of that, it seems to me, Sean, like you said, because and I believe her exact designation is graduate program coordinator, but she really is like the heart of the department. I feel Ms. Kathleen Griffin, whom I'm still in touch with, was that initial point of contact at Ohio State, right? And she was so prompt with the communication, so forthcoming. And again, I was coming from India, so for international students, as you can imagine, some of these there's just the reality of distance, right? And kind of figuring out a totally different culture, totally different education system. So absolutely, what you said was right there. Also, I think kind of all three of you touched on this. I mean, I think I was lucky that there was more than one person in post-colonial studies in my department, because let's say I had to change mentors, and I'm going to leave it at that, right? And it was fine. I mean, like I'm on, have very good relationships with everybody, but it was if I didn't have those other people also in my area of expertise, I don't know what I could have done. Like, who would have advised me? Who would have guided my project, right? And yeah, I think, to Jenny's point, I mean, I think also, Jenny, is the question of location, right? I mean, if you are in, say, Chicago, as opposed to, say, I don't know, Fort Collins, or, like in my case, say, Columbus, Ohio, I mean, then those factors also play in, when you're kind of thinking about your funding and so on. So thanks a lot for that, right? Okay. So now, moving on. Now, this might either trigger feelings of nostalgia or PTSD, or I'm thinking a bit of both. But so and again, Cody's kind of living through it. But let me ask you anyway. What was or is your typical week in graduate school? So we'll begin with Cody again, then go to Jenny, and then to Sean.
So I think my typical week, like I'll just pick like a point through the middle semester because I think that was the most consistent time that I actually had through grad school. Would basically be like last spring and last fall. So during that time, I was teaching two sections of CO 150. That was part of my like assistantship. So I had to deal with teaching and instructing about 40 students, give or take. I usually would have a few that would drop, just because of the way students are, I think, as we kind of can tell. There's so usually, like after teaching, I would also have 1 to 2 classes, and for some reason, I continuously had classes every Wednesday night from 5 to 8, and one of those was critical theory, and I still like remember being so brain dead after teaching that day from like 8 a.m. up until like 7:30 when my professor, who is also my advisor, was like, "All right, cool, let's switch to Derrida and talk about this now," and I'm like, "Can we not, please?" But I think that was the hardest moments in my graduate student life right now is like trying to balance between like the teaching, taking classes, while also still trying to develop my own ideas in order to like come to fruition and like for the future and to set me up for more success. It was 100%, I think, a challenge, and I don't think it's really hard, I think, to kind of prepare for those things. Um, it's incredibly hard to prepare for those things, especially when you start to get really bogged down by a lot of different readings, a lot of different work, and then trying to also stay on top of your own life and your own personal life. I find like there's always a balance between like what you can do in order for like to like care for your own mental health and then what you have to do for like work. And it was, yeah, a struggle for sure. Um, and I think I was really lucky. CSU has a really strong mental health program that like really like accepts everybody and like they always have access to it, which has been like super helpful just for me in order to like navigate the strange new environment that I found myself in. And it's one of those things that I'll like look back on both like I think, as like Suhan put it, like with a little bit of PTSD, but also a little bit of nostalgia. So it was a tough time. One thing I do also want to mention, my cohort for like my program, there's only 4 of us, or there were 4 of us. There's only 3 of us now. Um, and during that time, though, it's like they have honestly been like a really huge support group for me. And so even though like I'm going through my daily week like alone, I always had like a group of people that I can always commiserate with, or like, vent about things or talk about things through. It was actually like kind of nice to have that support system. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I'm so glad you brought up the camaraderie that you have in the graduate cohort, Cody, because I had the opposite experience where I was in a huge cohort, but then they split us down. So I think there were like 158 people in my cohort, but then they broke us up into groups of about 15. So I got really close with that small group, and they sort of grouped us by discipline because they had, everyone who's in English and everyone who's in philosophy all had their own sort of cohorts. So that was wonderful, just having that support system of people who are right there in the mud with you. They know what you're going through. They know how annoying that one professor is and how they always say it's the optional reading when that's all they want to talk about in lecture. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of reading. Yes, I had one professor who would assign us, I would say, roughly 400 to 500 pages of reading per week, and then about 150 pages of optional reading. And that is literally all she would talk about for the entire class period, was the optional reading. which was fun. So just being prepared to do a lot of reading and taking a lot of classes that may or may not be tailored towards something that is actually in your field or something that you're really interested in. There are definitely some classes I took that I was not expecting to enjoy nearly as much as I did. But it's just kind of hard to find that balance between reading hundreds of pages for your own research and then hundreds of pages for other classes that you also have to do, and midterms, and getting your first draft of your thesis to your advisor in time. All fun things. But yeah, so I'll leave it there.
I just want to echo a couple of things, especially what Cody said about mental health. Like, having access to good mental health can be a make or break thing, especially if you're having trouble. At IU, it was really hit or miss because they had the small office for a university that is like 50,000 students or something, or like 60,000 students. So like they were always overworked and couldn't get the help. But if you were able to find the right person who was helpful, it still worked. And I had a couple of things just to piggyback, which is at least before the pandemic left us all at home for 2 years. I found it really helpful when I was in my coursework to make sure I was working on campus rather than at home, and having a set space for that, just like creating space um, that is your space that you work in, and people know that you work there, so you can chat with people if they come by, but also that like is like it's a productivity like mental thing where it's like home is not for school, home is for home, school is for school. That doesn't always happen because the workloads are absurd, as Jenny was saying. And the other thing I was going to talk about, I want to talk a little bit because for a PhD program, you're there. I was at IU for 7.5 years, like forever, like no escape. So like as that program continued, my daily shift would change. So like when I was in coursework, I'd be on campus and teaching and doing the coursework. And then when coursework ended, it happened to be also when the pandemic struck, where just everything opens up and you just get all this time to read to prepare for your dissertation or your exams. And then like that becomes really difficult because you lose your structure that the coursework gives you. You have to guide yourself. And then after that, having to find different positions around campus because funding ends, and working for those while starting to write. And what this is all just to say there are different kinds of places where I was where my structure changed. So like in coursework or in exams phase, it was I'm going to read this book by the end of the day and hopefully get through it. And then if I don't, just like throw it out onto the pile because there's 50 other books to read. But when I started doing the writing, and this is something I'd actually strongly recommend, just that same like structuring thing, is to structure a specific time that you do writing. Like I always use Anne Lamott, the bird by bird approach, which is write an hour a day, no matter what, just do it. And like there are problems with that, but it is surprisingly productive how much you get done if you just like force yourself to work for an hour. It really does help. So yeah.
Well, thanks again. Yeah. So certainly in my case, I mean, all of hearing you guys speak, right? Yeah, it's certainly PTSD and nostalgia, but mostly PTSD. I don't know. But anyway, but I think again, I think the lots of things you guys said, but three things really kind of stand out. Just in terms of like the volume of the work, the reading, right? I mean, it's a lot, right? Also, I think yes, the need for community. I mean, I remember one of my mentors, and I believe he still does this. This was after we'd finished our qualifying exam, right? He used to have like a monthly potluck. So those of us who were part of his dissertation committee, we would meet once a month to just kind of share each other's work and so on and so on. And I know that that's not the culture in all kinds of schools. So it'll be interesting. Say, for example, just like the IU and Chicago and Ohio State probably have like a different student culture there. But I think that the other thing that you guys, I think all of you have mentioned, right, is the question of mental health, and I'm really glad because. And maybe I didn't seek out these resources on campus, but it seems that that conversation has become much more robust, and I think there are many, at least more resources available than there were in the past, right? And I think that's wonderful. That's really good to hear. Uh, Okay, thank you so much. So now I guess is we have like a couple questions more, and we've got half an hour. So this is I think we're doing really well on time. Um, so I'm sure you've got like 100 pieces, 100 or more, if you want to say, things to tell us in terms of advice. But in the interest of time, what is the one piece of advice, just one piece of advice that you would give to current students in our department considering graduate studies? So, Jenny, if you could get us started, then we go to Sean and then Kodia.
Piece of advice I could give would be to make sure that you have a good support system. I was really fortunate in that I had a strong cohort that were around me. It was also strange because I was so far away from all of my family. So just having those folks who are on campus with you that you can count on is vital. So make sure you have that strong support, whatever that looks like.
I feel like the one piece of advice, this comes from like a very privileged position, is to be really careful about going into a PhD program, especially right now. Funding is going to get eviscerated, or at least that's what it's looking like right now, which means partly that it's going to be hard to be able to stick around in a degree program for the amount of time that you need while still getting paid for it and like having insurance. But the other side is that it's already just bleak out there on the tenure track job market. Um, uh, this is mostly to say that like just to be careful and do stuff with intent, and that what the PhD really gives, and I think this is undersold, is that you will walk out of that degree with a ton of skills and be marketable in all sorts of different fields. But if you only target being the tenure track, like for me, a tenure track media studies professor, like those positions, the last one that I applied for had 300 people and I didn't even get past the like screening. They just threw it in the trash immediately, the application. So this is mostly just the be careful about the kind of be very intentional about the program you're going towards, and be sure to be aware of what possibilities are available in that discipline outside of the tenure track line, because there are tons. And I can go on to that, but I won't right now.
I think this conversation, like, I think the way it's kind of gone, I think I really resonate with both what Jenny and Sean have said as well. I think one thing that I came into this program not fully expecting was not only having like support from like my peers, but also like the amount of support that I've been getting from my faculty, like my advisor, my readers, and my other professors. They have really become like a backbone for me. I remember I sent my advisor like my first draft of my thesis, and I was like, "Hey, sorry, this is a little late. I had like a kind of like a little bit of an anxiety attack." And the response that I got from him was like, "Hey, what do you want from me? Like, what do you like? What can I do to support you better?" And it was like really touching for me, and it really re-emphasized something that I had learned like my first semester. One of the first classes that I had to take was a research and methods class to like be how do you be like a literature grad student. And in that class we got to meet with every single like literature faculty member as they came in, and they basically told us like their journey and like their story, and almost all of them have said that it is like really difficult to find like a tenure track position, like especially like in higher ed, and also that like you need to set your expectations depending on what you want. And it was a really like realist approach for me to like understand that, especially when I had first come in, I really wanted to teach. And I think like to Sean's point, like it is about those transferable skills. It is about like coming into this program for what you want to do and what you can find to do after this, and to again like kind of carve out your own zone and like your own area of being, and then staying in that zone, or like while staying in that zone, not being afraid to look at those other opportunities as they kind of present themselves, because you don't know where they're going to pop up. Um, this past winter, and I'll kind of like end on this story, but this past winter break, right before, like, as I was drafting my thesis, um, on a whim, I had randomly found like a lit magazine, and I had reached out in a cold email and I was like, "Hey, I really like your vibe. I like what you're doing here." I was like, "Do you guys have any like openings for an internship? I'm just looking for something to keep me busy over the winter, and I'm still an intern there now, and I'm constantly sending out emails for them, and we broke a crowdfunding record goal for us, so we have like a lot of fun things coming out." And I was like, this is an opportunity that literally I had not thought about a month before I had tried. So I think when you come into this, kind of be really open to the potential possibilities where life is going to throw at you, but at the same time, you're going to walk away with like the most amount of knowledge that you've ever had before, just because you're going to be in this environment, and it's been fabulous. Like, I will never not doubt that like I am where I am right now because of my master's program and everybody that's gotten me here, and it's been like just a blast. So
And there's just a couple of threads here, which again for me are important. Um, One, I think, one of the many things I loved about my PhD advisor is that how attuned he was to the vulnerability of grad students, I think. And that, so I think both what Sean and Cody said, and Cody particularly, I think that, yes, that it's so good to know, right, Cody, that when your mentors have your back, right? And it's not just in terms of like the extraordinary knowledge that they have, but also in terms of just the fact that they know that you are in a challenging position in more than one ways, right? So I think this is absolutely important. Also, it was really heartening, I think, to hear both Sean and Cody, and this is a good segue, it seems to me, to the next question, was that again, when you think about like going through a master's or a PhD program, then the expectation is, well, you are of course going to enter academia, but then I think Sean and Cody both said that no, you are actually acquiring a whole lot of skills there, and you are going to, and you're which you can market, right? And you can do things and very exciting things, in fact, outside of academia. Then this kind of takes us to our sort of final question, and again, it's sort of about that. So Sean, Cody, and Jenny, if you want to kind of fold this thinking about like marketability and portability of your skills into this, you could do that. But here's a question: that what are your plans after completing your grad program, or what have you been doing after completing your graduate program? And we're going to start with Sean, Cody, and Jenny. And this time I'll remember.
I got this position before finishing the degree. I told my boss that, oh yeah, I'm like 6 months from finishing, and that was 11 months ago. I didn't need the degree for the position, but I'm the Digital Health Humanities Program Coordinator at the University of California, San Francisco. Um, the the thing that is most interesting about this is that there is one person on the planet who is qualified for this, and it's me. I feel like, because I do digital humanities and I do history of medicine, and I have a background. So one of my graduate positions, um, when I finished my funding, so I had 4 years of funding at IU in media school. That was confirmed, and I'd had colleagues who had their funding pulled out from underneath them in their fifth year. A lot of them were able to have continued funding, but some of them got screwed. And when I saw that, I sort of was fishing around to try and get a position so I wouldn't have the rug pulled out from underneath me. And I got into, kind of by chance. I got a small grant from them, and then started working for them. It's the Institute for Digital Arts and Humanities at IU, which is great, but doesn't exist anymore because of how funding works. And they gave me a lot of skills to do project support, and specifically sort of scholarship, both by graduate students and faculty members, and how to support those projects. And so the role that I'm in is very much my position is funded through the National Endowment of the Humanities, and the goal was to bring 10 scholars in and support their research and build a program that would help scaffold their learning of digital humanities skills. And so all of this is saying that, like, I went a very weird path in my discipline because I am media studies, but I hate media studies, and I do medical history, but I'm not a medical historian, and I'm a digital humanist, but I'm a weirdo. And no one talks to me. No, I'm kidding. But like all of those sorts of things allowed me to tap a very specific niche that will allow me, hopefully, knock on wood, because when the funding will run out, be able to work in a library, try to make my way on the tenure track job market, sell my soul and work for Google or something. I don't know, but like there's the skills that I sort of got along the way helped me get to that position. Mostly because I'm just like I feel you very closely, Jenny, in the like I don't fit anywhere kind of mold. But there's like a lot of advantages to that because sometimes you'll find the people that you really click with and those skills will make you very different in that environment.
Okay. I don't know exactly what I really want to do after this program. I think it's something that I've been trying to contend with for the past like 6 months or so. For the first time, I think in the past like 10 years, this has been the most blurry of a 5-year plan that I've had, which is okay. There are some opportunities that I know I would like. I was thinking of also returning to that old office job, the one that got demolished, not necessarily that one, but something similar to it. That was with human resources up here at Larimer County, and that was actually like really fulfilling for me. And I got to like help my community like right away. So I was really intrigued by that. So I would hope to maybe find something along those lines. I would prefer to stay closer to academia, so even in something in admin, I think would be more appropriate for me too. But there is a side that I do like where I do really enjoy teaching. There's something that has been really fulfilling for me to also just help share expertise to a bunch of students while also making that like the like personal connection with them and like understanding who they are as people. And I want to kind of continue like to do stuff like that. So I've also been trying to reach out to like the library up here to just see if I could do like a community like book club class or something, which would just be really fun. It'd be a way to continue teaching literature, I think, to people who would really value it. And so I've been really looking into that, but we'll see how that pans out. But otherwise, I'm not too concerned about the future because there are those transferable skills. Like I know that I have a lot of um, stuff to bring to different places. So I have no idea where I'll end up, but I'll end up somewhere, and it'll be a fun little journey to see where that takes me.
So since I graduated, I have been working as an administrator at a charter school. I'm actually the dean of students at a school in Grand Junction. I sort of am the inverse of Cody in that I'd been teaching for a long time, loved it, but then I thought, you know what, maybe I could actually do more for the community by being an administrator. That was a mistake. I'm going back to teaching. I don't want to deal with being the administrator anymore. So I actually, and to talk about what Sean said about funding, it's been a crushing PhD application cycle because it's really difficult to find a department that I fit in, and then B, my area of research is not politically popular at the moment. And is probably chock full of all of those banned words that will get funding canceled. So I think that could have something to do with why I haven't received a funded offer. But I did get admitted to a couple of other master's programs, sadly without funding. So I'm choosing between those right now, but my hope is to land a teaching job and be a part-time master's student, and probably looking at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque for that. So that's the hope.
Well, thank you, Jenny. I guess on a somewhat lighter note, what if you say if your research is cool? I mean, they can't ban cool, right?
It is cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, so I don't think they can ban that. But again, these are again terrific responses. And you know what, I was listening to somebody, an academic, a couple of days back, and they were saying, how because of a lot of things that you guys said and some of the other political stuff that's happening, right, that there is a need for, I mean, the intellectual work is important. It needs to keep happening, but we need to find alternative spaces to do that, right? So like there's someone who, I mean, I've just discovered his podcast. It's like last month or something. His name is Jared Henderson, and he does this thing on philosophy, which I love. I mean, it's oh wow, okay. So Jenny has also knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, I mean, I think this person has a PhD, and he has just a way of like again making philosophy interesting and also rigorous, but for a non-academic audience, right? So when students come and talk to me, I mean, like, I guess this is what sort of Sean was saying, that ultimately it's your choice, but go with your eyes open. But also note that there are other spaces opening up where you can, or spaces which you'll have to create, right, where you can continue to do this work, right? It doesn't, it's academia doesn't have to be like, that doesn't have to be like the be all end all, right? uh, Okay, so thank you so much. This was like fun. And we've got like, and we have 10 minutes, right, for Q&A. Anybody on the call, can you guys please jump in? As you see, these are all very nice and kind people, very smart people, and they will be happy to field your questions. If you'd like to kind of drop your question in the chat, uh, or if you would like to, just kind of, unmute yourselves and ask a question, please go ahead. I've been teaching for a while, and so have the other panelists. So we are used to awkward silences. But then please don't let academics come in, because academics, professors, we love to talk, right? So please, before we start to any of that, Shruti, excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to read out Shruti's question. It's in the chat, and any of you guys can take it. Or how specific does your research focus have to be in a master's program versus a PhD program? So Cody, I think, yeah, you want to get us started?
Yeah, just because for my thesis, like going into it, I've always had these really grand ideas that have always kind of been really, like, I would say impactful or grandiose. And one of them, when I came into my program, one of the first classes that I had to take was the same one where I had all those professors come in. I had to come up with two proposals. One proposal for my research was like, what do I think I should be doing versus what do I want to be doing? So the one that was should was why I came to the university. It was to study Gothic literature. So I had a whole thing built around, again, the fall of House of Usher, because it's always been really impactful to me, especially since I took Pazusa's humanities class with Heedle like a little while ago. Um, and that was the original one that I had come in with and like kind of what I wanted to pursue. But then the other side really was something that I had been wanting to talk about for like, I would say, like, since I started my bachelor's, and it was like, how can we fit fantasy more into like into academia? How can we fit fantasy more into like literature discussions and like consider it as like a viable source of information? Um, and what that ended up turning into was more of a just focus on like Dungeons and Dragons and how that went in. And then it ended up spawning this whole idea of like, how do we make equitable fantasy? How can I get this into authors' hands? When I approached my advisor for that to talk about that as a thesis project, he's like, yeah, that's a little too big of a project. He's like, that's the book you write after this. I was like, okay, fair enough. So basically, from that point on, though, it's like my advisor worked with me. We had a lot of back and forth, a lot of meetings in his office, a lot of just conversations, just talking like through whatever I kind of wanted to research, and then him giving me direction and pointing like me in the right way. What that ended up becoming was a lot more narrowed and a lot more focused, specifically with like one singular theory, what's a subgenre I want to focus on, and what's a single text I want to focus on. And so that really evolved into what that ended up being. So it was really, I don't know, it got really fun trying to get to that point. And it was, like I said, a lot of meetings, a lot of late night meetings that went probably way too long because we would end up just talking about our own interests. And I got lucky because my advisor is 100% like into American fantasy and like talking about that. And now he's also resorted now to just giving me books constantly. And like, I don't know what to do because he keeps giving me more books. And I'm like, you got to stop, man. But anyway, so I think to answer that question, it's more about like you don't have to be as specific, at least for the master side of things, because that'll eventually start to boil down and like narrow as you just kind of go through it. So it's just a process, and I think you just have to kind of trust that process. I can't speak towards the PhD side, but I know that for like the masters.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here and talk about advisors for a second. So I had two amazing, wonderful advisors at the University of Chicago, Ben Lawrence and Andrew Fiddle. They both were amazing. But they gave me conflicting advice, which is sometimes something that can happen. So Andrew's feedback was always, your topic is way too broad. Where are you going with it? What's happening? And so when I would take it to Ben and say, what do I need to get rid of? He was like, don't you dare take anything off of it. You keep it all here. It's just the way you need it to be. So I guess to answer the question about how specific your research has to be, I think it needs to be specific to whatever it is that you are willing to spend a lot of time doing a tremendous amount of work with. And also, like, as specific, really do listen to your advisors and their feedback, and just see, how specific they expect you to be, while at the same time standing up for yourself and doing what you need to do in the first place. And then PhD, we're going to let Sean take that away.
I feel like the start of it needs to be like a thunder or something. This is completely unrelated, but Cody, you mentioned, and there is a special issue on actual play, Dungeons and Dragons and JCMS this month or this quarter, just so you can have it. Because the real academic love language is throwing citations at people. And I apologize already. So I think it's something, the process, I like Cody was saying, the process is really, if you embrace process, not product, you will get a good product at the end. Like, I think process is, you have to do the exploration to get to where you need to go. So like, I started the PhD program as a filmmaker wanting to study French film, and I said no thank you pretty quickly. I did some research on jigsaw puzzles because those were fun, and there was a scholarship at the Strong Museum that I could get. And then I was like, these are fun, but they're called dissected puzzles, and I'm kind of curious about this dissection. And then that led me like 4 loops and like through some, like the Bermuda Triangle, got to where the dissertation ended up. Is that like, you will get there, and if you have advisors who are doing their job, they will help you get there and they will help guide you. Just to add on to what Jenny's saying about advisors, the advice that Dr. Ortega gave me when I was applying for PhD programs back in 2016 was, don't get an advisor who's famous, get an advisor who's a good person. Like, the most important thing is working with kind people and surrounding yourself with like, I always called my committee just a bunch of teddy bears, because I just knew they were here to help support me, and they weren't like trying to pick fights. Although I had one committee member that we were a little worried about because he sent some cryptic emails before the dissertation defense, but it was fine. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. So Helen says that how she's proud of everyone on this call, but especially of Jenny and Cody. So thank you, Helen, very much for that. And I think that I think this question's been answered, but maybe I'll just, and again, if you guys have something to add, and we've got like 3 minutes. So Cody mentioned having this is from Joy. Cody mentioned having a niche direction. Are topics that are more out of the box accepted in a master's program? So I guess we'll have just like one person maybe who wants to kind of jump in. Okay, Jenny, do you want to kind of quickly jump in? Yeah, thanks.
I'll just jump in really quickly, because my topic was something that everyone told me was completely strange and was never going to happen, about space colonization and how we need to have some ethical framework to govern that. So it started out like, what are you doing? And by the end of it, they actually gave me an award for one of the more creative theses in the program. And now it's obviously clearly relevant. So yes, go outside of the box. It's good.
And we have time for a question from Margie, which is, what was the culture like at UCCS, and how did it help you in your move toward grad study? So Cody or Sean, do you guys want to take? Okay, Cody's really trying to go. Cody, go, Cody, go.
I just want to say that the culture at UCCS is amazing in terms of like helping us grow. A lot of the professors that are in here now were also talking to me about my program when I like of what I wanted to do at the time. And I was talking to almost everybody, and it was really enlightening. It was really fun. They constantly pushed me and they didn't sugarcoat it either. Like they told me it was going to be a gut punch of a time, like the entire time, but they constantly said that like it will be the most intellectually rewarding thing that you would ever do, and I fully 100% agree with that. It is beautiful also to see everybody here. Like it's awesome. Hi everybody. I just want to say that. Sorry. But you guys are all great, and I think the community at UCCS is fantastic. And honestly, if you would have had like a master's program or a PhD program in English literature, I probably would have stayed. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just want to kind of read. We have like a minute, so just read Sean's comment. I'll add a detail about being out of the box. It is hard to get into a program, but being outside the box helps for grant funding and getting accepted into conferences and getting publications. And then again, he adds, he has some kind words of his own. For UCCS, I didn't realize how wonderful UCCS was before I left. And Jenny adds her own kind words there, saying that the professors at UCCS rock is what she says, which I think is awesome. So thank you very much. So we are at time. This has been even more fun than I thought. It was really good to meet you, Sean, and congratulations again on your defense. Wonderful reconnecting with you, Jenny and Cody. Cody, all the best for tomorrow. I'm sure your defense will be awesome. And yeah, I think Tessa really kind of summed it up beautifully for us. Thanks, you all. This was fire. Absolutely. Guys, if we are at time, but if you guys have any questions for applying to grad school, please email me. If I don't have answers, then I will email them to our wonderful panelists here. But this was great. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good evening and take care, everybody.